As Ukraine has proved, it's a much different global environment since the United Nations was founded after the end of World War II. Now the international body is looking for better ways to adapt to the changing face of conflict in the world. Liling joins us live from the UN. And Liling, we're seeing a strong push for change. What kind of reforms are being considered?
Well, Mike, as you know, the UN has for some time come under significant criticism for being more reactive than preventive, more talk than action. And now, given all these ongoing civil wars, cross-border conflict, and the ever-growing threat of terrorism, there is growing consensus among a majority of member states that the UN has to, as you said, adapt, but also adjust in order to more effectively and efficiently deal with global conflicts.
Syria's civil war, the conflict in Ukraine, the threat of extremism spilling over from Syria and Iraq into North Africa and Europe. 70 years after the United Nations was formed, it is now a different world of conflicts, and UN member states agree the world body needs to catch up.
Collective security is the core purpose of the organization. Unlike in 1945, however, we no longer have a full meeting of minds on what that means.
In the world today, countries are more interdependent than ever, and their interests are increasingly intertwined. Antiquated thinking such as the Cold War mentality and zero-sum games should have long been thrown out into the trash bin of history. China advocates a new thinking of win-win and all-win cooperation, as well as a new concept of community, building for shared interests and common destiny.
3 themes emerged from this open debate: better prevention of conflicts, a more unified response to addressing disputes, and adjusting international action to deal with evolving threats.
Consider Syria. When the Assad regime launches deadly attacks on peaceful protesters, when it tortures tens of thousands of detainees in its prisons, when it employs openly starve or surrender tactics, inflicting a devastating toll on civilians. Amid all of this, divisions among member states continue to prevent the Council from taking action to stop the regime from attacking civilians, or even speaking in one voice to condemn the violence and call for meaningful accountability. As a result, we've let down the people at the heart of the Charter.
The US called for more action beyond mandates and sanctions, while France and New Zealand pushed for reforms on the powers of veto that have prevented more decisive action.
The use of the veto, or the threat of the veto, is the single largest cause of the UN Security Council being rendered impotent in the face of too many serious international conflicts.
The question of veto has come up repeatedly over the Ukraine crisis as well. Russia, accused by other nations as a party to the conflict, is also a permanent member of the Security Council and can veto any decision to intervene, essentially putting the Council in a deadlock.
So even though these collective calls for reform is a promising step for an organization struggling with numerous and new types of conflicts, given the kinds of divisions that we're seeing within the Council itself, any push for change, to put changes to pen and paper, will in all likelihood be a long and arduous task. Mike?
Let me ask you about China. What role does it play in addressing conflicts, and what role can it play?
Well, here's an interesting thing. Now, China did convene this high-level ministerial meeting, this debate on peace and security, but in doing so, it also cast the spotlight on itself. And one journalist put the question to the foreign minister this session, asking him about China's increasingly aggressive role in global diplomacy and what's driving it. And in his response, the foreign minister said he drew on China's history with the United Nations, in which China was the first country to sign on to the UN Charter, saying that China has played a significant role in post-war international order since then, 70 years ago. And in calling for reform, the minister said that China has a vision for a United Nations that can better anticipate conflict, that can opt for cooperation and will opt for cooperation over confrontation, and to strive for, in his words, a win-win, not zero-sum approach to dealing with conflict. Mike?
All right, Liling live for us at the United Nations there in New York. Thanks so much.